Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the Hungry Athlete podcast. We're also transitioning into the Share the Road podcast as we're doing these interview style interview podcasts. Our guest today is the University of Miami graduate. There, she studied architecture and writing and began her personal business painting self portraits and murals for her community in Miami. From there, she continued her education at Yale's Graduate School of Architecture, where she expanded not only her knowledge but was active in bringing more community fridges to the city of New Haven, Connecticut, through Dwight Community Fridge. As she is a Strout Fellow at Cornell University, student teaching, she has began her speaking career at many venues such as BSA plus GSA PP Home Symposium and Harvard University. She continuously advocates for the Cuban and Haitian community while inspiring and creating spaces for artists to express themselves through events like Art in the Park. She holds multiple awards such as the Cornell Council for the Arts Awards, Yale Moulton Andros Awards, the University of Miami Alpha Rho Chi Award. Share the Road community. Let's welcome Sydney Maubert to the podcast.
Hey Chaz, thank you.
Second time's better, right?
Yes.
Yeah, how you doing? How's your day going so far?
It's good. I'm doing good. It's going well.
I just want to get right into the podcast and tell me a little bit about new architecture and how that looks for you. What does new architecture mean to you?
That's a really good question. I think the education I received at the University of Miami potentially taught me that architecture was a lot closer to the practice of building,
Mm-hmm.
whereas my time at Yale opened up new possibilities for me to think about its kind of social and political positioning. And so I think that's what I'm presently bringing a lot into my practice and teaching is that architecture is a tool for social change.
And tell me a little bit about your first introduction to architecture. Not everybody or not every kid, in their life gets the build Bob the Builder toys or the build, the Legos that you get to build a certain structure. Tell me about your first introduction to architecture.
Well, I think the first time I was introduced to the word architecture was my dad telling me I should apply for architecture for college because
Yeah.
he was an architecture major. He didn't end up finishing architecture, but he was studying at City College in New York. And so when end of high school rolled around, I was looking at him like, well, I don't want to be a doctor. So what's what's next?
Yeah.
And he was saying it was a good combination of art and the sciences. So that was my intro. But even the first day and probably the entire first semester, I was still confused, like what was going on and what architecture meant. So
Tell me more about that.
the very first day of I guess it would be like an open house. It was like our very first class. I
Yeah.
remember we all got pulled into the auditorium in Korak at UM, and our professor was standing there in the front. I actually don't remember who this was, but I remember them asking whose parents are architects, and
Mm.
like half the room raised their hand, and they're like, who's like, uncles, cousins. Like it just seemed like it was something you were kind of born into, and I was like, I am in the wrong room.
As they were mentioning, more family members, were more hands being raised, basically.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Mm.
and that is a beautiful thing. I hope that I can build something um for my family in the future if I do end up ever having kids or what have you. But I would love for me to have this thing that I could pass on. But I just felt completely ostracized by that because I knew that this was outside of the scope of my access.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, if we're being real, nepotism's real, and I'm not saying our school is a cause of it or effect of it, but in America, a lot of people are not even like a lot of family. They just bring their kids into the same business, or kids can be inspired by their parents or just the actions that they're doing. So it's only natural that that could happen. But I also want to get into your own mediums or even just what you prefer to paint with. So, what do you feel like is your favorite medium to express with?
That's an excellent question. The entire time I was at I didn't play with representation at all, as far as
Yeah.
painting or anything outside of conventional means of representation in architecture. But um, I tend to say painting. I do both acrylic and oil. Most recently, I've been pushing towards oil, and I really prefer working there. It is expensive, which I think is why I used acrylic for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But all of my time during Yale, I kind of got noticed by classmates and faculty or remembered for pushing different representational styles the entire time. So I would do tapestries, fabric work, these are just things that I was just like, oh, I'm gonna teach myself how to sew, and I would just like do it by hand. I was just trying to figure things out. But oil painting.
What do you feel like was your most challenging medium that you worked with in terms of? Because I heard you talk about tapestries. I'm interested about that.
That, even though it was tedious, was quite enjoyable for me because I
Mm-hmm.
did go mixed media with that piece. So I did cheat a little bit and paint a little bit, and I kind of leaned on both. But I made a wig for one of my studios, and that was the hardest. That was the hardest thing. Yeah. That was
What
my hardest
inspired the
assignment.
wig? What inspired the wig?
I wanted to do an architectural pavilion based on black braiding traditions. So I was
Mm-hmm.
looking at Yoruba hairstyles, and I wanted to basically take the way that braiding could get used as a tool of communication
Nice.
and implement that into architecture. Like the idea that architecture could speak to people or
Mm-hmm.
could resonate with people was interesting.
Love to hear that. That's super nice. I kind of want to take a left turn into just what might inspire your vision or some certain things that you would like to see in the future. Is there a place that you would really like to see just for the architecture, or there's a place in the future that is on your list that you want to see because of with that you think is beautiful, or you think the buildings are different
Like geographically, a place I want to go?
geographically? Yeah.
Oh, that is a good question. Um, I've really been wanting to go to either Nigeria or Ghana because a lot of the architectural precedents I look at come from
Mm,
either their material cultures or just their architectural vernacular. Has been interesting.
yeah. Do you know if you have any? I know a lot of us, we come from that. So, do you know if you have any family from over there, or does your uh, nothing really?
No, but I mean, Cubans, a lot of us come from Nigeria, the Yoruba religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's from Nigeria. So I think I've always had like an interest. And I think again, my exposure going to Yale and like making really meaningful friendships with people from those places also opened me up to look at different precedents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a little bit into you had mentioned your Cuban heritage, and I want to mention you definitely advocate for not only your Cuban heritage, your Haitian heritage, but you represent for the women too. And so I want to make sure that I want to ask you like, what is something that your how does your culture or where you come from influence your art basically now?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm interested in blackness, and that was something I really wanted to push while I was in school, and especially like gender was interesting to me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Something I wanted to push. Could you rephrase that?
Um, More so, how does like your Cuban culture, your Cuban and Haitian culture, and especially like well with feminism, basically, how do you feel like that influences your art now?
I look a lot at Haitian art, always did. Just I think being a Haitian person, that was just like natural. I don't think I could even name artists for you when I was younger. Now I can, but when I was younger, I couldn't. And so
Gotcha.
I think like just in general, like the palette that comes from Caribbean culture, like you see it in the
Yeah.
marketplaces, you see it on the street. You see it in Miami as well because it is a predominantly Caribbean context.
Hmm.
I think that informed the palettes that I am attracted to when I paint.
Nice. And I definitely I want to bring up one person, um, Angela Davis. What does Angela Davis mean to you? And how to like tell me about how like you first got introduced to her, or like what does she mean to you, honestly?
Um, I think in the most superficial sense, because I was always remembered for my hair. I was attracted to images of her because she also had like a very similar hairstyle. And the
Yeah.
first few articles I read was her mourning the fact that people were only remembering her for her iconic hairstyle. And
Mm,
that really resonated with me on certain regards, because when I would interview for things, people would say like, "Oh, love your hair," but they wouldn't take the interview further, or like they wouldn't give me a chance. So I
gotcha.
was like, okay, this is something that profoundly resonates with me. And then as I started like reading her writing, I would listen to her lectures to motivate me in the morning, or just like recordings of her speaking when I was at Yale, because it was even though I did find a community, a very like strong and significant community of Black folks, we weren't a large community. Like that was mostly who I was hanging out with, but it wasn't a lot of us. And so I used a lot of Black female authors to sustain me and to nourish me. Bell Hooks, Sadia Hartman, um, several other women, but yes, that's how she helped me get
Those
through
other
grad school.
Yeah, no, those other authors, do you recommend any books by them or anything of their like speeches that they might have said that people would really be inspired by?
Bell Hooks has a good lecture. This Ain't No Pussy Shit is what it's called.
I love it.
That's a good
This ain't
one.
no police shit.
Hmm.
Okay.
And there's another conversation that I'm struggling to remember the name of. Let me circle back on that. But with Sadia, Sadia's books, Venus in Two Acts is excellent,
Yep.
as well as Scenes of Subjection. And oh, for Belle, also Teaching to Transcend's a good book, all about
Nice.
love, Wounds of Passion, Bone Black.
Okay. That's a good list. I'll probably circle back in the editing to write those down so that we can get a good transcription so that people can look at those basically. Are there any other artists or any oh yeah, let me just get into that. Are there any artists that you feel like influence your style of architecture or your paintings?
My mentor and champion would be Jermaine Barnes. He's an excellent friend, peer, colleague, great designer, um, all around good person. But I look to
Mhm.
him a lot, not only just for direct like mentorship, but also like I look at his work. Um, Sekou Cook is another really prominent architect who influences my students significantly. My students love looking at him. His sister Nina
Where are they
Quinton.
from?
Sorry.
Where are they from? What's the person's name and where are they from?
Okay, so Jermaine is based in Miami. He's originally from Chicago.
Mhm.
Sekou is Jamaican descent, was educated at Cornell. Nina, his sister, is also educated at Cornell.
Nice.
Um,
Family affair,
mhm.
basically.
Yeah, there are definitely more people I should be mentioning right now, but I'll cap it. I'll cap it there.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. I appreciate you even sharing those couple artists. That gives people something to even just look at their own stories and just find some inspiration. Because I know even in my own personal history, I for example, I'm really inspired by Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, and I found that in different separate ways. I remember there was this book that I read. It was called Blood Brothers, and I also read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And a lot of people there, they like Malcolm X for different reasons, but also I can appreciate his like just his transitions through each one of his stages like he was always Malcolm X, but he allowed himself to like shed different layers of his ego as his journey went on. And so even you mentioning Angela Davis and we both got the same hair. I think it was a type of thing where people come to us even and like, oh yeah, nice hair, but it's just like
Mm,
even it's not even about the content. It's about like well yeah, it's not even about the content. It's about like the almost the outside image and basically not wanting to only be known for the outside image, but what we're producing as artists, basically. So shoot, I can really empathize with that. But I
Um,
really, yeah. Are you all right?
yeah, that reminded me of a couple of things like
Yeah.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't know if you've read his work, but he has a book that he writes to his son where he's talking about basically like how almost like every question he receives from journalists as a black man, like
Hmm.
whether knowingly or unknowingly, is about his body. You know, like what does it feel like during BLM? Like what does watching this trauma look like, or what does like having this kind of bombardment, what do these images, how do they feel to you? Like they're always questions about your body, your flesh. So it's not
Hmm.
just about women or men. And I think that's why like in my work I do think about gender like itself, because
Yes.
obviously there's nuance within every community of people,
Hmm.
but it does interest me what's happening to almost everyone, especially within marginalized situations, you know.
Yeah. You're hitting a lot of point there, especially because not only it's just like a lot about the exterior and just how we're I don't know. It's like we're looked over. It's definitely like looked over in a way where certain people, or even just talking about earlier, like opportunities in coming into colleges and things like that, and how we respond to those situations, basically. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's super loaded. It's a lot. It's a lot that goes on with whether it's art, us trying to get into certain spaces or even build those spaces. Um, it's a thing. It's definitely a thing we're working on. And yeah, I want to bring it to your hometown in a way. That's even where we met, basically in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, or do you are you still affiliated with Art in the Park, or how did the Art in the Park happen, or was that just one event?
So Kwam I met through Instagram because Mary Kate was, I think, represented by them, and that was the only like person I had seen represented by any kind of like. I had heard of people being represented by galleries, but I hadn't actually known somebody who was represented at the time, and so that was the
Got it.
only like connection I had seen ever. And so I reached out and said I wanted to donate my BLM piece to them, and so that's where
Got
that connection came.
it. Okay. Word. Can you tell me more, just a little bit about the BLM piece that you had made? Like, what inspired you to even start that initially? Before that opportunity came to you.
That's a longer. Okay, so I had been commissioned to do a mural in Wynwood before the BLM protests were starting in Miami.
Yep.
So I was painting a mural of three different celebrities in Syndicate Wynwood in their old location. That building was going to get knocked down. I didn't even know that. So I was working on this very large, it was a 30-foot by 10-foot mural, and the facade of that building is entirely glass, so you could just see out. And so I was still working on this mural. This was my first very public artist work. This was before I even technically started my business. That mural was what made people want to buy portraits from me. And so
Got
I was sitting on the floor painting, and I looked out the window, and people were protesting like halfway through me working on that mural, because I worked on that mural for a couple of months.
it.
So I was like, what am I doing right now? Like, I just felt like me working on a mural that had no real, like, it was so meaningful to me in the moment, because I was like, wow, this is my first artist job. I'm finally doing the thing I want to do for like my entire life. This is my dream come true. And I realized like the images were so devoid of meaning compared to what was really going on, not only
Hmm.
as it pertained to my community on the whole, but just me as a black woman. Because driving around during that time was very stressful. I was always, I mean, we all were going through the trauma of that experience together. And so I was like, I'm never doing anything meaningless again in my life.
Yeah. No, that's a
um,
good resolution to have.
so I went home and painted this mural. It was 5 feet by 4 feet. I didn't have the visibility of Wynwood because I'm not a graffiti artist. I'm a muralist. I wasn't, I just was like, I don't have this
That's a
platform.
large piece too. Yeah.
I was like, I don't have the platform, so I just went and bought the canvas and started painting. And I was like, but I want this to get seen, so I just figured I'd donate it to somebody or do something with it after. And so that was the organization I chose, because I had seen the type of work that they had done. Like they were, taking young Black boys into prisons and teaching them how to paint. And so I haven't lived at home in like 4 years. I'm hoping that I could participate in one of those workshops at some point. But yeah, like I saw that their ethos matched mine. And so it felt like a good space to donate that piece to.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you even talked about how the timing of you even working on the black that one mural while the riots and the protests were happening. It just seemed like a lot of our worlds, like whether it was like we're working on our, say we're trying to just establish ourselves, in the world, whether it's our career, making a foundation for, possibly making a family in the future, and then there's protests in the street, and it's for valid reasons, whether it's you know and that was really it was really bad at the time. Police were really killing people in the streets, and it was just because of our color. And a lot of people, um we things had to change, and things are changing now. um and it's just, even it's kind of it's honestly, I can see that being a good I can see that being a turning point in your life mentally, where you're like, all right, like, let me just finally work on things that matter to me, or let me help other people in my community. And so, actually, let me talk about a little bit about your business with Sydney Maubert LLC, right? That's what yeah. And so, what inspired you to start the business? Or you could talk about your first portrait, but let's talk a little bit about your business doing that.
Yeah, so all of this is, very connected. So I produced the BLM piece. I donated it at some point, but one of my girlfriends, Margaret Goldman, she is a Jewish scholar currently getting her PhD at UC Irvine and in criminal justice. And so she said, Sid, I want two of those. Like, I want two of those right now. I was like, oh, for sure. But this is me. Like, I went from having no commissions, not doing art publicly. That the Instagram that I have for my business only had like 30 followers, and I randomly got like that mural commission. So I was not getting like I was not getting paid for anything. Nor was I calling it a business at that point. But she asked for two pieces. I made her a piece of Angela Davis, and I made her another piece. I made her, actually, no, I made three pieces for her. And so I made three pieces, and that turned into like a snowball effect of people just DMing me and asking for pieces, to the point that I had to start a business. Like, I literally had to start a business because I had no way of keeping track of all the
Yeah, got
support
you
that
keep
was
track
coming
of.
in.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Especially, could you even imagine yourself, let's say, like in college or even before the 2020 happened? Could you imagine yourself doing the portraits where you're at right now?
No way. I mean, all of my years at UM, like I was still painting, but I lacked so much confidence. And like I will say, related to everything we're talking about right now as well, like the politics of Florida
Hmm.
completely like didn't allow for, I think didn't permit people of color to have open discourse about what being in Miami was like as Black people, as for me, an Afro Hispanic person, as a dark skinned Hispanic person. Like, we didn't have there weren't platforms for us to have these conversations because of the racial caste system of the Caribbean. One, there's that kind of racial intersectionality, and then also just the binary of America in itself, right? It's the South. Like, Florida, we're in Florida. We're in South Florida. That's the
Yeah,
South. So there were
it's
so
the
many
South.
like things at play that weren't allowing us to have these conversations. But I think like us having a camera lens and an open platform to say like, hey, we've been suffering,
Hmm.
has allowed a lot of us to finally speak power to our suffering. And for me, that turned into a whole artistic practice. But that was also traumatic for me too, because I had people messaging me like, this is my son you just painted. This is my and I can't even understand the trauma itself of seeing your son randomly painted on, like, discovering a painting of your child online, or seeing
Hmm.
like spontaneous shrines of your child going places. Like, there's this one of the folks that I painted, his name's Shaylee Tilson. Like, that was a case that was on the news, and his mother reached out to me because I had painted him for Margaret, and that was so powerful, so sad. I don't know how to put it into words. Like, I even feel complicated now discussing it, but it needs to be said that I think art does have power. You know,
It's a
art is a
connection.
powerful
It's a
thing.
bridge to other people. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm so grateful that she found me. So
Because it's like if it didn't mean anything, like nothing would happen. But it obviously meant something to you, and so you painted it, and then it caused a however in the world it connected to his mother. It made its way to her. So it's even a blessing that stuff like that happens. Kind of even reminds me of So for example, I'm learning this piece right now. It's called Arabesque by Claire Debussy. He's a pianist from like 1700, and it's like amazing how people even now were able to. There's music from then that people are like aspiring to learn now, or even techniques like when people talk about famous paintings like Mona Lisa. Like, people don't know why the Mona Lisa is so important. It's because there were techniques that people weren't using back then, that this dude, I don't know his name, forgive me, but he was using on the Mona Lisa for lighting to figure out the anatomy of the face, and he did some crazy things to even get to that conclusion of like, oh, this is how the lighting looks from this angle and that angle. So art carries on, and so your art's going to carry on too. So you know that's definitely something that that's just even artistry is just amazing in its own breath.
yeah, I like that it's gonna live beyond me. That is exciting. Also, my last name. I don't have any brothers, and my last name started with my grandfather. So it
Mm-hmm.
only lived on for two generations. So I think that's also something that's really important to me. Um, is the fact that it kind of all begins and ends with me. And who's to say whether I'm gonna have kids or not, and whether I'll even get a hyphen? Like, my name might just die with me. So I love that I have something that might get remembered beyond me being here on Earth.
Yeah, I definitely want to. I'm gonna hold on to that. I'm gonna bring that point towards the end, because that definitely is into the final, the what did I call it? My fault. The parting perspectives. This is the this is a new form of the podcast, so forgive me. I'm not sure if you remember this piece, but I remember seeing this piece a while ago, and it really meant a lot to me. And do you remember the piece? And forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. Tignon or Tinon, the piece with yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that piece? That's personally one of my favorites of yours. I'm sure you're gonna make even more favorites basically in the future. But can you tell me a little bit about that piece, and either what inspired you, or how what that piece means to you?
Tignon Law, that piece was about these laws that they had in New Orleans. I think it was coming out of slavery. Forgive me for not remembering because this was a little while ago. But basically, they had laws controlling like Creole women and Black women's expression of hair, because there was
Mm-hmm.
this fear from white women that the hairstyles were going to seduce their husbands, basically. And so there were these laws that you had to wrap up your hair, and it turned into like this magnificent practice of creating these like gorgeous and rich. Like, there were all these limitations on Black women's stylings of themselves, their fashion, what they were allowed to wear at that time. And the painting that was kind of representational of that law, the woman in the painting, I thought kind of looked familiar, and so I sat for the painting myself, again because of all these thoughts and politics that I've had around my own body and hair
Yeah.
throughout my life. I sat for the painting and painted myself. Um, and I put a mask on her saying, I can't breathe, because I think a lot of people during my Yale experiences like associated like BLM with myself and my practice, because it did, I mean, I did think a lot about it like within my own practice. But yeah, I think it was just representational of where I was at in my practice at that time, and feeling stifled at times or limited at times because of the environment.
Yeah, it was really powerful to me, especially just how I feel like everybody felt stifled at that time. There was even like mental blocks. There was actual
Yeah.
blocks in the neighborhood of people just not being able to work. I know I wasn't working for a little while,
Hmm.
and like a lot of places closes. I mean, a lot of places closed. Families got closer, but also families, some people didn't necessarily have the benefit of of the entire pandemic. Not to say that it wasn't, I'm of the speed that you know people are gonna grow. People are gonna learn from every opportunity. We should be grateful for what happens, but not everything's peaches and cream. Like not everything that happened was good, and good by our definition in the English language. So I definitely, and I might even just through the editing, I might put that picture up really quick just so people get a quick peek, or put it in the link just so people can see that picture or that painting. But yeah, that was really, thank you for that one. And I want to talk about your most recent time becoming and I want to get the name right, an artist in residence in Everglades. So an artist in residence in Everglades fellow, or Ari for short. Is that right? Yeah, Ari for short. Can you explain to the audience a little bit about your residence in the Everglades and how that what that meant to you as an artist?
Yes, this has been probably one of the best artistic experiences I've had. It was my first residency, but
Nice.
I got to do it with friends and people who would quickly become friends. They have a
Hmm.
very helpful, positive, and collaborative spirit. I mean, the people who work in the residency are also artists, so they really opened me up to collaborating not only with them but also like with other people in the community.
Hmm.
That residency, I was exploring marronage. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but it's
Can you explain what Marinage? Can you explain that a little bit?
yes, it's during a time within either during American slavery or like exiting, at the turn of the 20th century, there was this connection between Afro and indigenous groups where
Okay.
people would like creolize or they'd like escape together. It's basically like this practice of fugitivity. Specifically, it's like the escape. So
Yeah,
petit
yeah,
marronage is like the short, like a short escape. So it might be like Frederick Douglass's mother, like her walking 12 miles to see him in the forest. That would be petit marronage. Longer escapes like Underground Railroads, things like that, Saltwater Railroad in Florida, that would be marronage, like a grand marronage, because it's a further escape. So I was
gotcha.
exploring the history of that in the Everglades.
Okay. And then tell me a little bit about the art pieces that came from that experience.
So my research while I was at Yale, my thesis was looking at Liberty City House, Liberty Square, Liberty City housing project. I was thinking about that's the first all black housing project in America. That's the first segregated housing project in America. And so when I would talk to residents from there or people who lived in the neighborhood, like they were often saying that their families came from the Carolinas, from Georgia, or from down south. Like they had, or the Bahamas, or a mix. And so I was realizing the conversations I was having was the same research I was doing, like in the Everglades, like archival documents. Like it was people saying that they came from the Bahamas, or that they had Afro-Indigenous history from the Gullah-Geechee people or all these other people. Like it was just interesting to me. So I did a piece that was basically like making it more like latent and apparent that a lot of people aren't in touch with our like Afro-Indigeneity, whether that be because we weren't allowed to have participate in that conversation or because
Yeah.
we're just not acknowledging it for other like social constraints, or that we just simply don't know. Like I think as a Caribbean person, like we're more invited to talk about like our indigenous
Yeah.
histories, but I noticed like in America it's almost like very taboo to have those conversations. And so I was like, I'm gonna throw a party
Yeah.
and it's gonna be all black, all indigenous, and I just wanted to like make it more latent that we can call it what it is.
Yeah. And I think more people have to be honest about the history of what our history is, or even not afraid to um just delve into the history, their family history, or even their local history. I feel like when I was learning a lot about, or even when I was down there in Miami, when I was learning a lot about just the all black cemeteries over there, or even just the amount of this Miami has an amazing history. Don't get me wrong, and even Boston has a crazy history. Like right now, I'm in Boston, and even to go into even the family level, like what I'm trying to do right now is make like a family tree, and even to do that, there's a lot of politics with that. Not even politics, but there's a lot of night, and I hate to call it, but family members with just different brothers, different sisters, or even people married, different types of marriages, people getting divorced, if we're just being honest, and families continuing on from there. And to record that history, there's a lot of pain that goes along with it,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't want to really address that pain. And so even now I can appreciate people, they're looking at their ancestry, they're looking at they're getting the DNA test and seeing where their people are from. But I do think it's another conversation of people trying to, we just need to understand our family history and our local history, and then we'll understand why certain areas look the way they do, or why certain people act towards, you're even bringing up the dynamic of the politics of being black in Miami and dealing with those different powers. Like not everybody looks, or you can't express your entire culture on your face. So
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
it's hard in a lot of spaces to even not even, yeah, it could be hard in some spaces to even walk in the door based on how we look, you know so yeah, what inspired the name Queen of the Swamp?
I was listening to Jackie O, and she's a Miami rapper. She's Haitian descent. She was basically making a diss record to Kaya, another Miami rapper, and she was
Okay.
like, everybody was battling for the Queen of the South title at a point in Miami, and so she was like, Queen of the South, more like Queen of the Everglades, and she kind of went in on her after that, and so I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I kind of want to name it Queen of the South, but then I think people are gonna associate it with me, like thinking that I'm like projecting. You know what I mean? Like, so I was just like, I'll just call it Queen of the Swamp because that feels like kind of funny and kind of like authentic to the vibe I'm trying to capture. Like, I am trying to like draw attention to this deeper history, but also like shine a spotlight on this moment to say like, why doesn't anybody archive like what Black girls do? Like, I just felt like that was weird that people don't archive like the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I want to also shout out really quick my friend Jerome Fulton Jr. His mother, he says like she's not a fashion designer. I found her and thought designer, and so a lot of her images informed the final design and also made its way into the piece as well. And so he's got a foundation in her memory because she died due to gun violence when he was very young. But his foundation's the Angel B. Wilson Foundation. So if you look up images of that piece, you'll see a lot of images of her.
Okay, so Jerome Fulton Jr.'s mom, and the inspiration with that. I'll make sure to have that in the show notes so people can see that for later. It's been a little bit, and it's been a really fun conversation. I've definitely learned a lot from you, and I want to get into these. This section is called the Parting Perspective. We're working on the name. I feel like it's pretty cool for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it.
All right, cool. We'll just keep it for now. But the number one question, we'll try to keep these short, but if we go on a tangent, it's whatever. But the first question in the Parting Perspective is, what piece of advice would you offer to somebody navigating a similar journey to yours?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say get a good mentor and use your time in college to network like that's all you're there to do, because that really is all you're going to get out of being in college. Like, make meaningful connections, look at people who are doing interesting things. Don't waste your time like partying or doing, like, yes, you should have a balance, but just understand that college is to network. So don't go making beefs with people and stuff. Like, just go there and make a connection. It is a professional setting. As much as people think like it's like, the time to let loose, it is a actually really critical professional moment for you. So
Mm-hmm. And do you want to shout out any mentors that you feel like had a big impact on you during that time or even now?
Um, Jermaine Barnes, Billy Cien, and Todd Williams, Tatiana Bilbao, and I am forgetting a lot of really important people. My folks, my
Yeah,
parents.
yeah, of course. Love it.
um, I'll wrap it there.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. In the spirit of growth and learning, how do you envision your perspective evolving in the next year?
That is a very good question. I am trying to be more transparent in my practice. I feel like I've always turned the camera lens on other people.
Hmm.
With the Queen of the Swamp piece, it did start with, I mean, it always starts with questions about myself, but I don't usually make it into the final product unless it's like a self portrait. But even then, I'm not really like speaking about myself. So that's what I'm trying to do moving forward.
Yeah, it looks like we're starting it right now, so it's working.
Yeah.
Um, that's yeah. There we go. Make some resolutions working together. What's one daily practice? Oh, okay, okay. I'm interested with what you're gonna say for this one. What's one daily practice that keeps you grounded and focused?
Man, I've been on go for so many years. I don't think I have like honestly, I don't think I have anything except for like praying in my car. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my car driving places, I will reflect and think about everything that I want to do, that needs to happen, gratitude, things I need to work on. But other than that, I just apply for things every day. And I always have applied for things every day. That's something I've done
Yeah,
since I was like leaving high school. I just apply grants, scholarships, anything. Like I just apply for stuff.
gotcha. Okay. And do you also? I'm interested about the praying piece. How were you introduced to your faith, or how do you express your faith now?
That's a really good question. I was raised in Catholicism and I went and switched. I like converted to be a missionary Baptist
Mm-hmm.
when I was in college. So I would say that's really where my walk began. But in the most like childlike way, just like to me, the world doesn't make sense if God didn't make everything personally. But I also
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate other people's views on things, you know. But I just feel like the same way you don't look at a piece of art and think like, oh, someone didn't make that. Like obviously someone made like someone there is a clear author of the universe, of earth, of ourselves. You know, to me it looks like a consistent kind of like creator. A lot of people refer to God as like an architect, you know, so like I look at it that way. It's like this to me looks like the same designer. But I think like you have to acknowledge those that came before you. You have to acknowledge like the ultimate creator. That's how I look at it.
Hmm. No, I can agree. I feel like everybody looks or sees God in a different way, or even what we serve in a different way. Whatever we do, people serve something. You know, and I definitely think praying is one of those things that helps ground me. Also, you did mention your gratitude practice. Being grateful for what's going on, and you do a lot. I definitely want to applaud you on that because even just in the research and trying to say the entire intro of your bio, I'm like, it's almost like a lifetime of work, and you're actually what 27 now. Like it's like you've done a lot in these past years. So I definitely I want to applaud you on that, and definitely applaud yourself. But yeah, the next question I want to get into is and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but who or what inspires you to push your limits and reach new heights?
I want to say first myself.
Yeah.
I am my hardest critic, and I've been, even though I have obviously a strong network of mentors, of family supporting and stewarding me, and I don't want to put them, like, I don't want to dismiss that, but I do want to emphasize I've been with myself my entire life. Like, nobody else's voice has been here as long as mine has, except for God. Like, it's just, myself and the big man upstairs. So I think like part of my like self-deprecating nature has pushed me in ways that have benefited me and also hurt me. But yeah, like I've always been like, okay, but how can we do it bigger? Or what next? Or like, how can I make, because I'm only going to have one life. And that has created like seasons of loneliness, and that has created other, what do you call it? Like flaws or downfalls in my life. But I think overall, like, I only got one shot. So I'm going to go out like a firework, is how I'm looking at it, you know?
Yeah. No, I definitely can empathize with that because I understand in terms of whether we're at a young age and we do have this energy and people misunderstand the whole oh, you have your entire life, but then you don't know how long your entire life's going to live. You don't know if he's going to take you away in 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 decades, 2 centuries. Who knows how long we'll be able to live by the time, I'm sure science and technology will be much different 5 or even 10 years from now. So I think it's honestly that you have a sense of urgency that you're gonna take this life for what it is. And I've seen a lot of people, they shy away from even doing certain things because they're afraid of what people think or what people might say. And even though I know your life's a little bit different, but on the outside looking in, that's the type of thing that you've been working on already. You was already working on multiple self portraits. You was already doing the. I know you've done multiple murals in Wynwood, right? Like it's not just one, right? Yeah, you've done these multiple projects, and I think that's what a lot of people, they need to work up to. They need to work up to the confidence of like, okay, because initially, you just like we was talking, you wasn't always selling your portraits. Somebody demanded you. It was almost like a knock on the door. It was just like, do you not see your talent? Like I want you to work with this. I want you to do that. And so even even in my own life, to share my own story, not to babble, but I remember I was on a pool deck, and I was coaching. Mind you, I was volunteering for a swim team. I wasn't even really getting paid at first.
Mm-hmm.
And parents were on the side. They're like, I need you to take I need my kid to be a little bit faster. I need my kid I need you to spend more time with them. And I'm like, and I'm thinking about volunteering it, but they're like, no, I'm paying you. Like, I want to pay for your time, but let's do this on a separate. And so that even helped me expand my my confidence in my own swimming business, because it's like, not only do I have the skill, but I have the ability to be able to teach too. And I feel like that's how we learn a lot, when we teach. And I see that in your journey as you're being a professor. Like that's whew, you're a professor at 27. Imagine this. That's a whole story. I'm looking forward to your book later. Basically. Um, but yeah, before I have one more question, and before that, before that, I want to just tell you thank you for your time so far. It's been a really good time so far, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself too. Um, but my last question is, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Um, being a good and honorable person. And I would probably want people to remember my art before me. Yeah,
Really?
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah, I would want people to remember the things I make. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like it'd be cool if they associated with me, but I'd even be cool with them being like, "Oh, that's what she looked like." Like, "Oh, I would
Oh
always
yeah.
heard her name, but that's what she looked like." Oh, okay. Like I think that's something I would like.
Yeah, I even think with the digital age, like our hopefully would be connected to our face, and so hopefully people will remember it in the not maybe not people. I mean, we can't really predict what goes on in the future.
Hmm.
So we gotta just do what we can right now, make the best art that we can, and hope
Hmm.
the world, hope somebody in the world gets inspired by it and do their own thing. Um, before we end the podcast, is there anything that you wanted to leave the audience with? Any last notes that you feel like we didn't talk about, or yeah, just something that's on your heart?
Well, I want to commend you for always encouraging others. I feel like that's something that I've always noticed about you, even since like undergrad, is that you were always a very encouraging and introspective person. So I think like you taking the initiative to create platforms not only for yourself, but again, like it was always like thinking about other people, which I think is important. So I just want to applaud you for that, and for taking enough interest in my practice and myself to invite me to speak. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I really do appreciate you and even helping me with that, because I remember our conversations even in college, where it's just like, we're both going through hectic times. Like college wasn't that easy.
No, it's not.
We
It's
just
hard.
sit down and just like forget that and just talk for a little bit. And so thank you for being a good friend and even just giving me the opportunity to even talk about your journey. And so hopefully, as this podcast grows and as we both grow as artists, maybe there'll be a part two in the future. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds. Um, Once again, Sydney Maubert, architect, muralist, professor, amazing person. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. Um, Check her out at other. Do you want to leave socials for the people? Anything you want to leave them with?
Sure. You could add me on Queen Sydney Rose. That's QUEENSYDNEYROSE, and everything is there. Like my website, all my things are there. So
Amazing. And it is all there. So you'll be able to see Sydney Maubert. Thanks again. Till the next time we talk, we'll probably just text. And hopefully I can come to Miami soon. It's been such a long time. Are you doing Art Basel, by the way? But yeah, I know I just thought I was going to end the podcast. But are you doing Art Basel?
I have a piece in Art Week. It's the second install of Queen of the Swamp at Green Space Miami, and the performance slash party is taking place December 9th from 10:30 to 12.
Okay. And this podcast will be out before then. So maybe this will bring a couple people and they'll be like, oh, I saw you from the podcast. So,
Yeah, I would love that.
No doubt. All right. Hope you have an amazing day. Thanks again, Sydney Maubert. Go ahead and follow her on at you'll see it in the bio. But, see y'all again. Thanks again, Sydney.
Bye.